The blood curse. Naomi always dismissed urban legends, especially the chilling ones whispered in hushed tones at sleepovers or late-night coffee shop gatherings. But one story haunted her after she first heard it. A cursed sanitary pad said to bring doom upon anyone who used it without burning it afterward. The tale always sounded absurd, but something about it lingered in her thoughts, like a song you can't get out of your head. She never thought she'd come across it herself. Naomi's day had been chaotic. Deadlines at work, arguments with her boyfriend, and a sudden rainstorm left her drained and soaked to the bone. To make matters worse, she realized she was out of pads. She cursed under her breath and ventured out into the night, her umbrella barely holding up against the wind. Most stores were closed by the time she found a small, decrepit convenience shop tucked away in an alley she didn't remember noticing before. The fluorescent lights flickered as she stepped inside. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with glassy eyes, didn't acknowledge her. Naomi noticed the shelves were almost empty, save for a single packet of pads sitting on a dusty shelf. The plain white packaging bore no brand or logo, just a price tag that read free. She frowned but grabbed it, assuming it was a promotional item. She called out to the shopkeeper to confirm, but he just stared at her unblinking. Unease prickled the back of her neck. Shaking it off, she muttered a thanks and left without waiting for a response. That night, Naomi felt odd using the pad. When she opened the packet, a metallic tang hit her nose like blood mixed with rust. The pads inside seemed used, with faint reddish stains at the center of each one. She almost threw the packet away, but exhaustion won over. It's probably just dye, she told herself, convincing herself it was harmless. After all, periods were messy. What did it matter? She applied the pad and fell into a restless sleep. The nightmare started just after midnight. Naomi was standing in an endless, dark hallway. The air was thick with the smell of iron, and her footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. She looked down and realized blood was dripping from her. It pooled around her feet, spreading faster than seemed possible. Panic rose as she tried to run, but the blood pulled at her ankles, dragging her down. In the distance, she heard faint whispers, growing louder, forming a guttural chant. Her eyes snapped open. She was back in her room, drenched in sweat. But something wasn't right. The bed beneath her was soaked, not with sweat, but blood. Naomi bolted upright, gasping. She pulled back the covers and found the pad, still attached, dripping unnaturally. It wasn't possible for her body to lose this much blood. Trembling, she changed and threw the pad into the bathroom trash. She spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at the door, half expecting something to crawl through. The next morning, Naomi prepared to forget the incident. She wrapped the pad in layers of tissue, tossed it in the outdoor garbage bin, and went about her day. But when she returned home, she found the pad sitting neatly on her bathroom counter, unwrapped, spotless, and somehow pristine. Her stomach churned. How? She grabbed it with shaking hands and threw it down the building's garbage chute. She even went outside to check the dumpster. It was gone. Satisfied, she returned to her apartment only to find the pad waiting for her on her kitchen table. This time, it wasn't clean. Blood oozed from it, pooling onto the floor. Naomi called her best friend Anita, desperate for help. Anita arrived within minutes, brushing off Naomi's ramblings about cursed pads. But as Anita walked into the bathroom to check, her face turned pale. The walls were smeared with bloody handprints leading down to the trash can where Naomi had thrown the pad. "What the hell is this, Naomi?" Anita whispered, backing away. "I don't know. It keeps coming back," Naomi cried. Anita grabbed her arm. "We'll burn it. That's what they do in those ghost stories, right?" The two women placed the pad in the kitchen sink, lit a match, and watched as flames consumed it. The fire burned unnaturally high, its roar deafening. As the flames died down, an ear-piercing scream echoed through the apartment, followed by an oppressive silence. Naomi and Anita exchanged wide-eyed looks. "It's gone," Anita said shakily, trying to convince herself. But the horror was far from over. That night, Naomi's nightmares returned. She saw herself standing in the same dark hallway, but this time she wasn't alone. Dozens of shadowy figures surrounded her, their eyes glowing red. They chanted in unison, their voices dripping with malice. "She used it. She burned it. Now she belongs to us." She woke to find herself standing in her living room, barefoot, with blood smeared on her hands. The pad was back on the counter. Over the next few days, Naomi became consumed by paranoia. Every attempt to destroy the pad failed, burning, cutting, even drowning it. Each time it reappeared, bringing with it fresh horrors. Blood seeped from her walls, whispers echoed in her ears, and figures loomed in the corners of her vision. Anita tried to stay with her, but even she couldn't ignore the growing danger. One night, she woke to find Naomi standing over her, clutching the pad, her eyes glowing red. "You can't leave," Naomi whispered in a voice that wasn't her own. "It's yours now." Anita ran, leaving Naomi alone with her curse. Weeks later, Naomi's apartment was found abandoned, soaked in blood. The convenience store vanished, only to reappear in another town, its shelves restocked with a single packet of white sanitary pads. The warning spread once again. If you use it, you must burn it, but even then, you'll never be free. Naomi tried everything to rid herself of the cursed pad, burning it, cutting it into pieces, burying it, but the curse only grew stronger. Each time the pad returned, the horrors escalated. The blood that seeped through her apartment now pulsed as if alive, whispering her name. The shadowy figures that haunted her dreams began manifesting in her waking life, their glowing red eyes watching her from every corner. One fateful night, Naomi stood in her living room, surrounded by the shadowy entities. The pad floated in the center of the room, glowing like a beacon of doom, pulsating with unnatural energy. Blood veins stretched from it, binding Naomi to the floor. She screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the growing chants of the spectral figures. She used it. She burned it. Now she belongs to us. The figures closed in, their forms shifting and twisting, as though made of smoke and shadows. Naomi's reflection appeared in the living room window, but it wasn't her anymore. The face in the glass smirked with a sinister confidence, her eyes glowing the same red as the entities. Naomi's final scream echoed through the night, cut short as the blood enveloped her entirely. When Anita and the authorities arrived the next day, the apartment was empty. No sign of Naomi, no pad, and no blood. Just an eerie silence and a faint metallic smell lingering in the air. Anita hadn't been the same since Naomi's disappearance. The police investigation had gone nowhere. No body, no blood, and no leads. Naomi's landlord, desperate to rent the apartment again, cleaned out everything, leaving no trace of what had happened. But Anita couldn't shake the memory of that cursed pad, the blood on the walls, or Naomi's terror-filled eyes. Weeks passed, and Anita tried to move on. She buried herself in work and avoided Naomi's old apartment building entirely. Yet, the nightmares persisted. She often dreamed of Naomi standing in a dark hallway, her face pale and eyes glowing red, whispering, "It's not over." One evening, Anita came home to find a package waiting on her doorstep. No return address. Curious but cautious, she opened it, revealing a plain white packet of sanitary pads. Her stomach dropped. They looked exactly like the ones Naomi had shown her. "No, this can't be happening," Anita whispered, shoving the packet into her trash bin. But all night, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her. When Anita woke up the next morning, the packet was sitting on her bathroom counter, perfectly pristine. Panic gripped her. She grabbed it and rushed outside, tossing it into the nearest dumpster. But when she returned home, it was back, this time open, with one pad lying on the floor, blood dripping from it in rhythmic pulses. The next night, Anita's nightmares grew worse. She dreamed of Naomi again, standing in a blood-soaked room. This time, Naomi spoke clearly. "You have to pass it on, Anita. That's the only way. Someone else has to take it, or it will take you." Anita woke with a start, gasping for air. Her hands were covered in blood that wasn't hers. On the wall above her bed, a message was written in dripping crimson. "Burning it didn't save me. It won't save you." Anita began researching the pad's origins, desperate to understand the curse. She visited obscure forums, libraries, and even spiritual healers, piecing together a horrifying truth. The curse fed on guilt, fear, and desperation. It chose its victims at random, offering no escape except to pass it on willingly to another person. But even then, the pad always returned, eventually. The blood curse had been around for centuries, whispered about in hushed tones. It had ruined lives, destroyed families, and left countless victims in its wake. One stormy night, Anita made a decision. She couldn't live like this, haunted, terrified, waiting for the inevitable. She remembered Naomi's words, "Pass it on." Anita packed the pad into an unmarked envelope and sent it to a co-worker she despised, someone who had wronged her in the past. The guilt was overwhelming, but she convinced herself it was her only option. Days passed, and for the first time in weeks, the pad didn't reappear. Anita began to breathe easier, thinking the nightmare was finally over. One evening, Anita was working late when her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "Thanks for the gift. See you soon." Her blood ran cold. She looked around, and the lights in her apartment flickered. The bloodstains on her walls began to reappear, spreading like veins. The pad was back on her bathroom counter, glowing and pulsating. Anita realized the curse had never truly left her. Passing it on wasn't an escape. It was a trap. And now it was stronger than ever. Anita's life spirals into chaos. The curse intensifies, manifesting in horrifying ways. Blood seeps from her walls, shadowy figures stalk her every move, and the pad begins to speak, whispering her darkest fears. Every attempt to destroy or discard it only strengthens its power. Meanwhile, Anita discovers she's not the only one dealing with the curse. Online forums and dark web communities reveal others suffering similar horrors. The pad exists in multiple places at once, spreading like a virus to unsuspecting victims. The curse seems to be feeding on collective fear and growing stronger with each new victim. Anita dreams of Naomi almost every night, but the dreams become more vivid and terrifying. One night, Naomi's voice changes. It becomes colder, detached. Naomi appears not as her old self, but as a spectral figure with glowing red eyes, her body veiled in dripping blood. Naomi begins appearing in mirrors, her reflection replacing Anita's. She offers cryptic advice. You can't fight it. You can't escape. The only way out is through. Anita realizes Naomi is no longer human. She's been consumed by the curse and is now its messenger, luring others into the cycle. The pad demands that Anita pass it on to someone else, whispering that it's the only way to escape. Anita struggles with her guilt, knowing she would be dooming an innocent person to unimaginable horrors. At her breaking point, Anita considers passing the pad to her estranged co-worker, her cruel landlord, or even a complete stranger. But each time she hesitates, haunted by Naomi's fate. The curse pushes her further, tormenting her with visions of her own death if she refuses. Finally, Anita makes a horrifying discovery. The curse doesn't end when she passes it on. Instead, it creates another version of itself, and both versions continue to torment their respective victims. She realizes that every time someone passes it on, they become permanently linked to the curse. Anita's own torment won't end. It will simply lessen, while someone else suffers more. Determined to break the cycle, Anita investigates the curse's origins. Through the dark web and mysterious folklore, she learns of an ancient blood ritual from centuries ago. The curse is tied to a vengeful spirit, a woman wronged in life whose blood was used in sacred rites. The cursed pads were her final revenge, binding users to her suffering for eternity. Anita discovers that the only way to break the curse is to perform the ritual again, reversing its effects. However, the ritual demands an unimaginable sacrifice. Anita must willingly shed her own blood to atone for the sins of all who used the curse before her. Anita gathers the ingredients for the ritual, each step more dangerous than the last. Along the way, the curse's torment escalates. Naomi appears to warn her. The pad's whispers grow louder, and the blood begins to seep into her dreams, pulling her closer to death. In the final moments, Anita stands at the ritual site, a desolate forest clearing under a blood-red moon. The pad glows in the center, pulsating like a living heart. Shadowy figures surround her, chanting in unison. Anita performs the ritual, cutting her palm and letting her blood flow into the cursed pad. As the blood touches it, the pad explodes in a blinding light, and the shadowy figures scream as they dissolve into nothingness. For a brief moment, Anita feels peace. The whispers stop, the blood vanishes, and the pad is gone.